session on art and science, a vital reintegration, I would call it. I welcome all the panelists and welcome all the guests from previous session also to stay if they want to. The more the merrier. Wonderful to see you all. And also I do want to acknowledge, first and foremost, an incredible support team from the World Academy of Art and Science that is working around the clock to support all the time zones and the programming. And we lean on you and thank you on behalf of all of us. I do want to congratulate the World Academy of Art and Science on its 60th birthday, and also to thank all of my colleagues, mentors, friends, collaborators, wonderful people, creatives, and scientists that I've met, and activists, I should say, that I've met over the years of being engaged in the World Academy of Art and Science. Welcome to the Art and Science panel. As the description of the panel outlined, we are looking at the ways in which art and science are multiple ways of knowing and how we need to reintegrate that knowledge to be able to respond meaningfully, creatively, and for the well-being of the planet, people, and our co-evolution, I should say. I'm thrilled to be able to be joined to convene this incredible group with my co-moderator, Donato KINIGER-PASSIGLI, who is the Vice President of the World Academy. And Donato, if you don't mind, after my welcome, I would love to listen to your introduction to the session because you wrote a very insightful paper on the connection, on the roots of the connection between art and science, but also the causes of their separation and your attempt to reintegrate them, leaning on historical, mythical references in that paper. So Donato, please join us and introduce the topic.
And thanks to all of you for being with us. It's a real honor, and it's a really fascinating topic that we are going to discuss. Thanks to Mila's introduction, I don't have to say much more. I want to leave the floor to you. You know, the little piece that I wrote that you may have seen was a sort of, someone calls them teaser, you know, but it's really a way to make you think about the importance of the essence of our own contribution as academians. We're all academians, and we are associated to the mission, to the purpose of this organization. That is really to advance the thinking of humanity, to improve, to stay connected, to have a dialogue, depending on the possibilities that we have. I mean, nowadays, we only have the possibility of talking online, but we will, I hope, also soon, very soon, be able to join again and to have other forms of exchanges. But the exchanges of the mind are productive when they really transmit something about ourselves. When we speak with our own hearts and minds, when we speak with our own experience, based on our own experience. And I believe that it's totally artificial to think that we are scientists on one hand and artists on the other, or we are political experts and sociologists on the other hand, mathematicians or engineers. I think we are a melting pot. In reality, we are, as academy, we are a melting pot. We are supposed to be a melting pot. This is really the foundation of the academy. This is our forefathers thought of the academy as an opportunity, as a network, the network of networks, as Gary called it, that is really the representation of different walks of life and in good intentions to create something together. So when we talk about art, we talk about creation. When we talk about science, we also talk about creation. There are two forms of creation that are part of our same self, our own minds, our own possibility to express ourselves. Past as it was at the time of Aristotle, of Plato, of all the old thinkers of the classical culture or the Oriental culture, the yin and yang come together. We are not an exclusive part of something. We are an unicum. We represent an unicum as human beings. And this kind of human beings is what we need. We need people that through their own experience manage to communicate their knowledge and inform one another about the possibilities for the good common cause, that is the well-being of humanity. So our well-being as intellectual people, but people also that can create. And the creativity is the real source of everything else. Creativity of the mind, creativity with our gestures, creativity with our souls as well. So this was the intention of my little write-up, to summarize what is the history of this obvious confluence of creativity, as I said, where you have the artistic, the creative part, and the scientific part that come together. We are here to hear from you. So Mila, back to you for really introducing each speakers and giving them the floor to debate this particular subject. We may have different views. Obviously, we want to hear different views, but with the intent of collaborating as part and parcel of one world academy, as our founding fathers wanted it to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donato. Thank you, Donato, very much for pointing out a fallacious separation that has happened. There are reasons for it, historical background for it, but fallacious separation between nature and culture. We as natural beings are symbolic animals and culture makers. That is our nature, is to invent, to create. And that is so important to point out, so that the history of separation rather created a very violent polarization in the human psyche, in the human politics, in the planetary affairs, after effects of which we're witnessing right now, and to which we need to rise to address and take forward and develop. Now, the history of that separation reveals that with the industrialization in the 1800s, there was an increased need for specializations. Art and science were not separated before. There's an increased need for specialization, and we have taken it really too far at this point, where we realize that the technological advances, such as steam engines, such as telegraph, or things like that, have actually taken us to a place there is a mismatch between technological development and psychological and creative development in that sense. So we've taken it too far, and we need to come back to the very opportune moment, which is critical right now. But even in the notion of kairos, historically, what it means, it's the most opportune moment for invention. It also means the will to invent. And that is our nature as cultural beings and symbolic animals. In that sense, human being is a multidimensional being. If we don't develop holistically, we will end up a crooked being. And this is what exactly is the malaise of the day in all of our domains of development and association. So the integration of knowledge is central, it's vital, as is the investment into art and cultural development, as is the new paradigm of human development. In that sense, I just wanted to set the stage quickly. So the point of this session is not to debate whether that's necessary. I think it's a pressing need and it's a parent need, but rather to think of ways in which we can bring about and accelerate this integration. We can honor it, we can bring it about, and also what are the ways in which the World Academy can actually integrate more its sources of knowledge and dissemination of knowledge, its programming, even to expand its own partnerships in a sense that that can develop the future of the World Academy holistically. That's the whole point. In terms of what art and science are, science is a mental art of the excited, curious exploration of our phenomenal world inside out. And art is in that sense a deep inquiry into inner and outer phenomena and expression of that inquiry. So with setting that stage, I would first actually like to call on an artist. We have an exciting panel. We have policy makers, we have scientists, we have artists, we have curators, renowned curators. I mean, it's a really exciting panel because this is exactly the kind of gathering, the motley crew that we need to integrate our call for action. But before we go into any kind of discussion, I would like to call on Serena SCAPAGNINI, who is the creator of the wonderful poster that we are featuring on our website in all of our sessions. And Serena, you're coming to us from a scientific lab, an artistic lab, to bring forth an image of integration. Would you like to speak about that image? And I kindly ask our team to pull forward to share the screen of that image if we can right now. Serena, please.
Well, thank you, Mila. And first of all, I wanted to thank you, Gary Jacobs and Alberto Zucconi, to let me be so much inspired by the vision of the World Academy of Arts and Science. Regarding the graphic, which connects my work of art with the manifesto of the Academy, well, I think this unity in diversity is basically comes very naturally from the subject of the artwork, which deals with the neurons and so the chromatic place of the two hemispheres, which runs to the center as a first symbol of this encounter between art and science. Encounter between art and science, which is not only playing a role because of the scientific inspiration of the work, in the sense that I'm working starting from the dendritic branches of neurons, which comes from the Hagley lab from the Yale School of Medicine, which I deeply would love to thank. But also because the two areas, not just say of the brain, but of our mind, might represent different area even of our life and disciplines. So this movement that runs to the center and naturally runs to this space gap, which allows every dynamic to be, it's one of the first reference to this encounter that in the embrace of the Academy could connect like a global network, all these branches. So in the images starting from neurons, we could consider that the connection of the light starting from the center really create a common evolutionary dynamic that could be shared with the vision of the Academy. Beyond this, just a few words to say about the work, which is inspired by neurons, but not only to create a reflection about the biochemical signalings that create our thoughts, or better, that allows our thought to be, but always paying an homage to this white surface of the paper where the images fades, and where we could imagine, as you were saying, that there is a space behind, like as we can see in the center of the images, this let's say transcendent part of the image that connect the two hemispheres, and so in this sense, the two area of the human consciousness.
Thank you so much, Serena. Thank you for being mindful of the time. I really appreciate that. And as we started with the separation in the image, we see the two hemisphere of the brains, and that that separation that is necessary in order for us to realize the need for synthesis, for synergy, and for integration at a higher point. And that's exactly what we see in that wonderful transcendent arc that you bring in, full circle of the human development. I really appreciate that. And I call on now another artist that helped us put together the wonderful video about the history of the World Academy, Raffaele Rossi. If you can briefly tell us a little bit about your experience and your process, granted that you had to revisit in a crash historical course, 60 years of world history parallel to World Academy history, and what you have created in this wonderful video. We have already seen your work. We would love to hear quickly about your experience and your input in the convergence and co-integration of the art and science in your process.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say good evening to everyone. Hello from Italy. And also I want to thanks again the World Academy of Art and Science to this huge opportunity that I gave from Sergio here next to me, and also from Gary, and also to you, Mila, because this opportunity for me was maybe the possibility to watch again and study the last 60 years of history, thanks to one association that I can say had more than an influence on the last 60 years. Like Bertrand Russell said in the video, and when the manifesto came out 60 years ago, we have to think in a new way. So this video and this editing in this a few days in little tiny time was the possibility to think in a new way, thanks to the WAAS, and to add a new approach in this course of history. And it was a huge, I can say, marathon and running all over the time with you and with all the team of Gary and the WAAS for creating this little documentary or this little teaser. I like the way to call it a teaser, because can be now it's a teaser. It's just 10 minutes to have a little gauge on the last 60 years of history. But I know that this 60 years of history wants to came out with a documentary. So I hope there will be the possibility to extend this work in this project. So I would just want to say thank you for this great opportunities, this great dish that I get from WAAS.
Thank you so much, Raffaele. Thank you so much. And you certainly have brought to my mind the notion of reuniting and merging the techne and the ars in the Latin root of their connotation. The one of the art and skill and craft, and the other is the method or the way. Actually, ars in Latin roots means science as a method, right? So thank you for combining all of those capacities to portray what leads us to the present moment, hopefully leading us forward. Now I would like to call on Adelina von Fürstenberg, who has recently become our fellow. We're honored to have your ladyship and to speak of your tremendous work of actually bringing arts of different kinds, different forms of arts, and in a very modern way, curating that knowledge, curating the entire arc of human accomplishment through your exhibits, through your foundation. Would you mind introducing yourself properly? Because I would like the audience to hear a little bit more about your background and your work, and exactly what it is that enticed you and motivated you to create a foundation, and to also showcase kind of unique artistic accomplishments for social engagements in your foundation.
Yes, can you? So I'm happy to see you finally, because we communicate but we never saw each other. So thank you for inviting me. First of all, I'm very grateful to Gary Jacobs, to Donato Kiniger, to all the committee of the World Academy to have me invited to be part of the fellowship of this organization. I will do my best to bring my knowledge and my experiences. In fact, my background is only totally art, creating art institution, creating curator schools, working in art since very long time. But all this is based on this concept of techne and techne, you just use it the word and metis, but also techne and poesis, which means techne is the knowledge and poesis is the doing. So this combination of poesis and techne creates art, the concept of art. But in the same time, we have to add also the concept of metis, which is to use the sharpness of the mind to create an object of art. But science, of course, is the logos, because it's together all this knowledge. So I wanted to quote it here before speaking about my work, the French Hellenist and anthropologist Marcel Detienne, who says that if logos is, if science is logos and art is metis, then metis to logos is what knowledge and know-how is to art. So this is what for me is very important, that these two disciplines are very parallel together since the history. And in the art world, the artists are very much interested and very much close to the research. They work with the research, they work with the new form. For instance, right now there is in Australia, in one university, difficult name next to Sydney, called Wollongong University, a show called Stories and Structure, where there is the parallel between the Aborigine and indigenous artists from Australia and images captured by the microscopes. And you see this parallel between this research of the artist and then the structure hidden in the natural world. So this reveals some unexpected, intriguing similarity. All this is a research that artists are very much spontaneously following, but in the same time, my organization, Art for the World, it came out from the 50th anniversary of the United Nations that I had the honor to curate, where the Article 27, everybody's right to enjoy arts and to benefit of science freely, this is the base of our organization. So we work with these two concepts together. After that, this huge exhibition of the UN, we did the 50th anniversary of WHO, which was traveling show between Switzerland, America, South America, India, called the Age of Awareness, again with a very large number of artists from all over the world, where we were able to confront the Western world with the global world, which was in the late 90s, beginning 2000, when the globalization in the art world became more and more open. So that opened us the possibility to make confrontation between the different culture. And most recently, my more recent work was the production of the film Interdependence on climate change and environment, where the different filmmakers from the 5 continents were able to illustrate the question as the problematic that we are facing today. And so this is why art is a know-how and science is knowledge, because this know-how can come from art and can be shared with the civil society and the experts through the everyday way of seeing the world, because both art and science look and observe the world. Just artists, they observe with a mythos, with a more, let's say, narrative way, and the scientifics, they look much more with the scientific way, but it's parallel. And I would like to conclude that art and science are the two sides of the universal language, and that, as Albert Einstein told, all art and science are branches of the same tree. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adelina. Thank you for actually already showcasing an example. First, we started from art creation from Serena and Raffaele. Now you're speaking about institutional responsibility. By having the foundation, you're also the bridge between international organization of UN and activist communities, which is incredible. So that you have a wonderful span exemplifying what an organization such as that can do to infuse institutional structures with more art representation, giving voices to the ones that have not been expressed or represented properly, and at the same time bringing and strengthening those communities, representing, for example, wisdom societies and other forms of knowledge that they also represent. So I really, really appreciate that, and all of that coupled with technological advances that you showcase, and really state-of-the-art artistic creation that are merging from combining technological advances and very impressionistic kind of individualistic psychological stream of consciousness kind of representations. I really, really appreciate that, because you're also sampling what an organization can be doing in a multifaceted way. I am going to quickly go to a person that is directly immersed in the scientific domain, but somebody who has actually been advocating universal polymathy for so long. The deeper he has gone into the material, the material starts being more elusive and reveals its immaterial nature. And I'm going to call on my dear colleague and collaborator, Rodolfo Fiorini, to talk a little bit about the unification in that universal polymathy, as we know that art and science were indeed, in the Renaissance times, all mental art, right? And artistic science. So Rodolfo, please.
Thank you, Mila. I started with this a recalling for all fellows of WAAS, just advising to read a 27 years old book that is titled Descartes' Error by Antonio Damasio, neurologist Antonio Damasio. Where I think that is fundamental to understand that the error of Descartes was just the duality of mind and body. As a matter of fact, we are just in a planetary moment to change and to amend that error, in the sense that we have to start to think about a non-duality of mind and body. And that's, I think, the new approach we have to follow, in the sense that even at mathematical level, we have structures that are linear and exponential. So our mind is able to follow linear thinking, and is, if well trained, even exponential thinking. But we are not educated to use both of those thinkings. And so we call one just a rationality, and the other one emotional. And as a matter of fact, they are just close together, as if we would like to be less wrong than in the past. We have to learn to use both of them together, because there is no duality. They express the same thing in a different ways. We are used to communicate by symbols, by representations, and those representations need interpretations, and so on. We can go deeper and deeper, and I approach at information level. And just to give an example, a simple example, think about the 15th century in Italy, the Renaissance century. where we had Leonardo da Vinci and Piero della Francesca, Luca Pacioli, and we got that as an important moment, a planetary moment for art. But as a matter of fact, if you go deeper, all of them had a strong connection with mathematics, and they created the perspective idea. And the perspective idea that they created at the moment, we can recreate, discovering how our mind creates perspectives. And that is the key to have a new vision of our worlds, to be less wrong than in the past. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodolfo. You bring in a key perspective here. I have mentioned initially the importance of investing and supporting and engaging arts and culture for holistic development, for a different course of development that we have done so far. And you bring in a very important notion of global security. And this adds on to what Adelina was pointing out, what happens with these unrepresented voices, that we experience loss of knowledge, loss of wisdom, loss of incredible insight. So we have crooked or misaligned or uneven development, which is the state of affairs today. And in order to envision a truly global human security, we would really have to foster on the kind of vertical plane full integration of human capacities, cognition, imagination, right? Memory, all of those things, right? Connect them, but also on the horizontal plane, all across our organizations, associations, and policy making for the future of development. In that spirit, and based on the notion of the future of human security, based on this kind of holistic development, I would like to call on Orhan GÜVENEN. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Please join us, sir, and introduce yourself. You come to us from a multitude of perspectives, and also as a fellow of a dear partnership organization, Club of Rome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really very much impressed of your presentations and what the colleagues presented. I don't know, the one that I'm going to present probably will be very modest. Anyway, I will try. I'm the former ambassador of Turkey to OECD. I taught in several universities, mainly decision-making, world dynamics and decision systems, and at the same time, nanotechnology impacts on socioeconomic structures, etc. Art and science, it's well known, are complementary. At the highest level, artists and scientists convert to polymath, as our dear colleague Fiorini, Rodolfo mentioned. Scientists convert to polymath, to Renaissance man, exactly, to Da Vinci. As mentioned in retrospective and reflections on WAAS 60 paper, it's remarkable, really. I was very much impressed by Donato. And this paper well presented also in this context. I quote, it's not what Donato wrote, but in this paper, retrospective and reflections on WAAS, I quote, science has improved our lives in many ways. On the other hand, it has also given us the capacity to ravage the environment on an unprecedented scale and obliterate our species altogether. I think with your permission, it's remarkable, but the real problem does not come from science technologies. It comes from us, from we, individuals, human beings. With lack of global social responsibility, destructive decision-making approaches, we create negative impacts in society, in our planet. Global social consciousness, global ethics should remain a necessary condition in decision-making. The other explanatory factors may change through time dynamics, space and time dynamics. Ethics must remain constant at the individuals, institutions, corporations, nation states, and international sphere. To deal with highly complex questions of modern world, transdisciplinarity is mandatory to understand and solve these complex problems. The amount of data produced and distributed through modern communication channels is high. A remarkable percentage of this data is not genuine. That leads to a phenomena which is information distortion. With my apologies, information pollution. In preventing information distortion, the starting point, the initiator, the igniter constant should be ethics for the regulators and for information security practice. A transdisciplinary approach on education is required to educate future generations to deal with complex problems of the world. The existing education structure generally is based on department system. It transmits dominantly an education of subset and partial analysis. It does not provide the methodology of linking subsets within an iterative approach of transdisciplinarity. The dominant system of the world is driven by power and power of money. I call it system 2. The dominance of system 2 causes serious problems at world level, like conflicts, wars, human traffic, degradation of national resources, use, etc. Problems, and to solve the existing ones, there is an urgent need to convert to system 1, which is based on science, art, technologies, innovation, value systems, culture, ethics, global social consciousness driven decision systems. Art, science, ethics, social global responsibility, human-centered decision-making will convert the solutions of existing problems to anticipative analysis and humanity. Real revolutions are in our minds, sensitivities, and aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being mindful of the time. And I particularly appreciate that you called forward the issue with power and power structures. As we have seen, there are not only issues within art, the separation between low and high art, between demographics that practice certain arts, between art forms and things like that. But we know in this separation, there has been a hierarchy created between science and art. And in many ways, we have seen in the budgets of nation states, in the global budgets, in the even family budgets, that art will always be slashed. It always has to take the back seat. And we have a situation here in the world now with the austerity programs that you also know. These are the first funds that get slashed and cut. So there's an issue about priorities and the vision for development going forward that we have to address in investing investing into arts and culture, and in the coupling of and valuing of arts and science together. So my question going forward for the entire panel would be to think about how we can have the systemic engagement of the arts to rebalance this situation. And then from there on, what kind of programming, what kind of initiatives in all spheres of human activity can we have for a full integration of art and science? Something for you to think about. And then I would like to call on now for a very brief presentation, or actually initial perspectives by Sergio SCAPAGNINI, with one note to Sergio, an introduction, a kind of a prompt. One of the things that I would like to point out regarding the human security on the individual as well as collective scale, is the opposite of the aesthetic, is not something that's beautiful and something that's ugly, all right? The opposite of the aesthetic is the anesthetic, not to feel. And the lack of empathy has been one of the crucial issues that we are dealing with now in development, in relationships, right? And especially now, the burning issue and the pressing need in the times of shared vulnerabilities of the health crisis in the world. Sergio, would you like to speak about the aesthetic and the anesthetic and how you address that and married art and science in your own work, empathetically?
Yes. Ciao, Mila. Good afternoon, good evening to everybody, according to where you are. And first of all, let me spend 2 words for expressing my emotion, because a few minutes ago, I could listen the intervention of Serena, the intervention of Raffaele, and this gave me the opportunity to thank WAAS in general, but specifically Alberto and Gary and you for having followed the effort of my young friends. Because when the idea started a few days back to have a beautiful poster, the poster started a little before, and the video, it was really something which we took from the enthusiasm of Gary for the film and Alberto for the poster as a kind of almost mission impossible, based mainly on the goodness and the enthusiasm of the 2 young artists. So I want to thank them both and thank the 2 persons, and I should say 3, because I have read also the beautiful interaction that you had with Serena and your passage from brain, mind to human consciousness, which is exactly what come into a point that we can connect with empathy, aesthetic and anesthetic. I am personally somehow joyfully obsessed by the real understanding of what we can call consciousness, because we understand each other as human beings thanks to the language. And that is why it's so important to distinguish, as you wrote to Serena, the brain, which is a device, from the mind, which is a function, and to reconnect everybody into the marvelous definition of human consciousness. But exactly, where is the consciousness? Where is it formed? In many, extent, for instance, there is a kind of convention in the world of literature, of philosophy, that the Romanticism has grown so much, and the philosophy has grown so much in the 19th century in Germany, because in the Anglo-Saxon language, there are more words to subtly define the soul, the mind, and whatever happens into our interiority in the moment of the so-called conscience. Now, consciousness is something which is still mysterious in the world of the neuroscience. In many other, happenings have been defined in the sense that scientifically we know which part of the brain enlight when we speak, when we see, when we hear, because of course, even thanks to some unfortunate event like when a person is hit by a stroke, the science can see which part of the brain and the neuron are turned off. And they know that that is the area where, if you have lost the sight, is the function. And this is known since long. But till now, I try to follow this subject because it interests me extremely. There is not a precise idea from the science where and what exactly we can say localize as the marvelous and mysterious consciousness. There is a recent theory which has brought a kind of different side to the possibility to understand, and it is that the consciousness is not exactly a state of mind, so something which enlighten in that moment, like the neurons which enlighten when we see or we hear or we smell or whatever, but is a process. The consciousness is considered not like a state, but like a process, which is extremely exciting. It's a theory, it's not a certainty. But why it is so exciting? Because it brings to the same subject which we discussed yesterday about this feeling of life, which is the beautiful title that you suggested for the film, which I have also to thank you, which is Flashback to the Future, which connect these marvelous things which happens in life when, from the experience of the past, you have a digestion of your experience in the present, and you try to project it in the future. Now, during the digestion, I think that consciousness compare our experience with what socially among the other human beings are considered the ethics. And the projection in the future can only happen if you are capable to connect with the consciousness of the other and try to create something which we can call the immediate future projected by our conscience, our dreams, our ideals. So this is marvelous because it brings the feeling of consciousness to the feeling of empathy. We cannot have a real consciousness if we are not in an empathic relationship with the others. And again, here we are helped for our hope as humanity by the science, which has recently discovered the famous now, because they have been scientifically discovered in '92, like the mirror neurons. The mirror neurons, which create the phenomenon of the mirroring, is the simple fact, which has now scientifically been proven, that a person observing another person who is experiencing a kind of emotion or a movement or whatever, share and divide with them the same emotion. So
thank you.
This is marvelous because proof that naturally, by nature, as we have been created, we are for empathy.
We are wired for empathy. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. In fact, the social science has brought over this concept and said that if this is true, it has been also proven scientifically that sometimes this natural attitude by which we could be fraternal in each and every moment is sometimes limited and blocked by some cultural, say, prevention, which is marvelous, because proof that you will not go into this gift of life, which is to be empathic with the others because of your cultural limitation. And this brings to aesthetic and anesthetic.
Thank you, Sergio. Thank you so much.
You enjoy this gift of the consciousness and on the empathy. With anesthetic, you are deprived. So let's be
thank you so much.
Empathic, let's be humanistic conscious, and let's be together with WAAS for building together.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. First of all, I've been given an impossible task to have a panel of an hour and 15 minutes of 11 people. So I'm trying to make sure that everybody gets to speak. And my most exciting part would be the conversation. I know Adelina had a comment probably about this last presentation, right? And I'm gonna ask that to be brief. I'm just gonna say thank you, Sergio, for bringing in the third higher point of ethics, where art and science inform each other in a higher ethical point to basically determine the course of our development. So I'm saying that because I want to set the stage for my 3 more speakers, and I was hoping to get questions and other things. But Adelina, I just want to make sure that we get your response, and if it's going to be very quick, so we honor everybody else. Unmute, please.
Very quickly, I wanted to add to Sergio's comments that this Italian neuroscientist Vittorio Gallese, he's the man who spoke about this mirror and neuron, and he works very much with artists. So there is already, when a scientist starts to discover something that he has an empathy with his research, already start to work with artists. So it comes naturally, the collaboration. We don't need always to put together, they go to each other. So I know artists who worked with him on this specific question of mirror and empathy.
Thank you. That's marvelous.
Thank you.
Already a point of reference. So I am, in terms of what we are mapping out here, is activation of this collective, integrated collective intelligence, right? And this, what I'm particularly interested in is, of course, this new process of social learning, right? And for that, I would like to call on Bob Horn to tell us a little bit about his own research, and succinctly and to the point, if we can, to open up that field and sphere of influence.
Well, what I want you to look at is behind me, what we call an information mural. And what I'm addressing and have been addressing for the last 20 years, along with a group of people, is the question of how. How do we actually integrate some of these things, art and science? Now, what are you seeing here? I had hoped to have a slide presentation that you can zoom in on and see in detail, but we haven't been able to do that.
You can share some of that in the chat as well, if you have a link.
All right, I'll do that. What you see here is a new genre of art and science together. Art and science integrated, already done 15 years ago, approximately, for the British agency in charge of nuclear waste disposal. The science of nuclear waste disposal. The mural was created by me as a result of the managing director saying, I've got 60 scientists running around the UK. They're drilling holes, they're asking people, they're doing all kinds of chemistry. I've got to integrate their thinking because I have a blue ribbon commission coming up that's going to ask us questions. And we have to have an integrated point of view. So working for several months, the result was a history. The first, you can think of it, the leftmost third of this is the history of the nuclear age, beginning with the nuclear weapons. The middle section is the decision-making situation, the policy situation that the agency was in face of right now at that time. And the last third is their 80,000 year plan. I repeat, their 80,000 year plan. And when I presented that for the first time as a draft, the manager says, oh, no, 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 no. And I thought, oh dear, I did something really bad. He says, I like your mural, but it's got to go out to 1 million years. I said, 1 million years? And he said, yes, that's when background, when the high level waste gets back to background level. So then we had a brief discussion of that he didn't have enough hallway space in his agency for me to create a million-year mural. So we truncated it a little bit and just put a million years at the end of the mural. Now, why is this important? Number one, it integrates art and science. It is a new genre that is being created. That totally integrates this. There are about 400 visual elements, individual visual elements in this mural, and about the same number of verbal elements. So it's words and visual elements together. Extremely important because we're trying to give full meaning to the thing. To the art object, what do I call it? To the art object, to the science art, to the science art objects. I will say just a few other things. I think mainly that illustrates what one of our former CEOs, presidents of the World Academy, a word that he invented that I love, Harlan Cleveland, called what we need as situation as a whole thinking. And then the question becomes, how do you facilitate? How do you really get a group together to facilitate as much situation as a whole? You can't ever be perfect about the whole part of it, but situation as a whole thinking, we have to approximate all the time. Among my, by the way, this is the small version, fits into my studio. Actually, it's about 3 feet high. You can imagine it being 4.5 feet high and greater than 12 feet long. And in the cafeteria line of the British agency in charge of nuclear waste disposal. So everybody goes by it every day. How is it used? That way, but also the managing director gives his orientation to people when they come to visit. They get situation as a whole thinking right up at the beginning. And of course, he was able to address his Blue Ribbon Commission in the same way and get all of his 60 scientists on the same page with
Thank
art.
You, Bob. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The key thing here is what you have presented us with, how central this integration and unification of ways of knowing is to anticipation, to policy making, to generating new solutions. That is actually really projecting things forward. And I would really like to connect this kind of reasoning with one of the exceptional fellows that we have, who is a master strategist and political thinker who I truly admire. And Lloyd, would you be willing to share your thoughts on the perfect connection to what Bob was discussing? I know of your work.
Yes, part of my background is in psychology, and so I would just mention that the visual cortex has enormously greater processing capacity than linear language, and it's just on the threshold of being explored, I think, and not rapidly enough of what these lines of what Bob has been doing. I think it's actually the typical desk work for most people is tied to linear processing and language and reading linear documents. So we have not organized work enough to take advantage of the capacities from stimulating the imagination and the visual processing. I think it's just absolutely fascinating. What I wanted to do today is to focus in on policy implications from our analysis, particularly for UNESCO and perhaps for the Club of Rome and others. As a lead-in, I would say that the second most visited website now in the world each day is YouTube. People are voting as to whether they want to buy books and read books or watch multimedia, and people often connecting to them through multimedia, and they're selecting YouTube. So I think that's an opening to say that we can do better than just the written word alone, though that can be developed. In my thinking, I call the arts, I will just use the word culture as being everything, which would include science. But I think that that's what is being created by the imagination and sustaining us. And it's, if you do a causal map of how things happen in the world, it is, many people will say, well, of course, it's the culture is the critical part of the emotional consensus, and when the time has arrived and so forth. But it's very hard to even agree on a definition of culture, and most people have not focused on it. So if we take that as our beginning, I want to suggest that we consider a project of improving culture each year by the product, let's call it the productivity of culture, by 5%. And for the purpose of culture, I will take connection or emotional impact to others, and then ask how would we frame the question and structure a policy discussion with the good offices of UNESCO as to how we would improve culture, given that will start an argument, but what do you mean? But that's part of the thrust of this. Let's take popular culture. We have many cultures: women's cultures, teenage cultures, scientific cultures, but let's take popular entertainment culture as an avenue, and we can look at the Billboard baseline of popular music. Most songs, even at their best, get in the top 10 for about a week or two and then disappear. So that's about the baseline of what we get in terms of emotional connection and value. And the economic payoff is extraordinary if you can get a hit song that stays there a couple of weeks and it really connects into people, and that they will hum or somehow engages some emotion that is remarkable. So we also have an answer to a question Bill Gates just raised: what are we going to do with all of our data? Well, with artificial intelligence, we now have, and databases we have available, if people have a use for it, all music that has ever been recorded in databases and online in all versions with all artists, and an enormous amount that can be processed and interacted with individuals to say, well, what is really connected to people? And how would you enhance that if we can learn about the brain and about options? That can be a technical scientific judgment. It can be cross-cultural creativity, borrowing. We have the prediction algorithms right now of that are like Spotify, that are really becoming quite remarkable about saying, well, if you like this, here is something like it that you might enjoy, which is a remarkable achievement to have that kind of refinement. But now the next question becomes, how would we distill this into coaching, into a curriculum? How do we get people to, by nature, become poets, or effectively popular culture? How do you write a popular song that somehow conveys an emotional impact, or perhaps a sensation of beauty, but an emotional impact through people? that is of more than usual value against a sort of background hum of, there's a poet, Billy Collins, who said in another realm that poetry is a bird and prose is a potato. So the question is, how can you, of the many functions that music might perform, teenage entertainment and so forth, but could enrich the culture and enrich a growth industry. For the third world, we think of them as only producing or primarily producing agriculture or products like the developed world did, but cultural products are an enormous way to connect to people and build part of your economy. But you need to get the pipeline straightened out. You need a real way to annually, I would say, try to find with a measurable way an improvement. You can also take, by the way, hymns in churches, any kind of music, if you're trying to create a spiritual experience. A friend of mine has commented, who's an organist in a church, most Christian hymns these days, they're kind of boring, or at least familiar. So we have, in any area, I think of the arts, the invitation.
Thank you for the wealth of ideas. For everybody that was really interested in Bob Horn's image, attendees are already sharing that in the chat, the link to bobhorn.us, so you can explore that. We only have, since we started like 5 minutes late, we only have the last minutes actually to round off this sharing. I will call it sharing. I wish it was more of a discussion, that we could have another round of conversation. But in this round of sharing, I'm going to call on Sheldon BERLOW, who remembers a lot of the history of World Academy. We're coming full circle after, the revisiting of the history by Raffaele and Serena's vision of the current planetary moment. We're going to Sheldon to tell us a little bit about what he wrote about art and science in the context of the World Academy founding, in the context of World Academy programming. Sheldon, please unmute yourself.
I'm Sheldon BERLOW. I am in Buffalo. I am impressed by the wealth of information, research, and everything we have here. I come from a different perspective. I am a businessman. We have been in the commercial real estate world for a very long time. But personally, I have always been interested basically in education and personally in the arts, of all the definitions that we can give to the arts over the years. Came into the Academy about almost 50 years ago, and with the original people. And it seems to me we are at a very important point, and really to get all this wonderful information and experience together, we have to start by saying, what is the definition of art, and why is it in the title of our association, the World Academy of Art and Science? Briefly, let me go into that. The definition of art, from my point of view, if you go to a dictionary or an encyclopedia, there are pages and pages of defining the fine arts and the music and the this and the that. A century ago, from Elbert Hubbard, if you know him, who was the founder of the Roycroft Association, which was to get to the roots of personal arts and preparedness and nature and so on. And he said, the definition of arts is not a thing, it is a way of life, period. That's my definition. And in order for us to go forward here and use all this research and all this brilliance. I think we have to first, then their next step is, why was the word arts put into the name of our organization, and what are we expected to do with it? And once we find that, then we come and say, okay, here's what we want, here's where it's broken, here's where we would like to repair it going ahead. And I can see openings from the students I taught at the University of Buffalo, 10 years in the honors program, of young people, a lot of in the engineering, a lot in the arts, and it was called Conversation Through the Disciplines, and what they woke up to, learning from each other, experiencing from each other. All of this, I think, will provide a foundation for our real goal here, is how to go ahead, not what we have done.
Thank you so much. That leaves us at a very high note, in a sense of inspired responsibility that you called us on. So Donato, if you have the final word, if you would like to round this off, I think we'll be cut off in a second. I really only wish that we had a deeper conversation, and you're motivating me to create different forums here in the Academy to actually generate real conversation rather than a procession of positions. So Donato, if you would like to close the session, I welcome that.
And I just want to echo the words of Serena at the beginning, where she mentioned encounter and enlightenment. I think that we are on course for an enlightened encounter. So a very important date. We had a stimulating discussion around the concepts of art and science. We are up to our legacy, I think, and thank you all. So thank you, Mila, for moderating this session, and to everybody for their contribution.
Thank you all. Indeed, thank you.